Morning. It's my entrepreneur series. We're talking about business plans, business plan basics. In this segment, I'm just going to talk a little bit about just the sections of the plan in general. I'll dig into each separate section in various segments that I'll do in the future, but I wanted to talk about the component parts of what makes a business plan and what needs to be in there. And some things that don't necessarily need to be in the plan, and just a general overview to get the process started. In future segments, again, I'll look at each different section of the plan and break it down and talk about some of the things I like to include in plans that I think investors are looking for, and also things that help the entrepreneur understand the business model a little bit better and hopefully plan better for where money's going to be spent and where the possible pitfalls are with the business, so you can address those up front before money's put at risk. So let's talk through what I normally include in a business plan. The first section of a plan, of course, after the title page and that kind of thing, table of contents, I typically put a disclaimer up front just to talk about the information and inform the reader of the fact that it is a business plan. It's based on a forecast, all those kind of normal things that go into a disclaimer. I also include a confidentiality agreement. A lot of people won't sign those, but I just include that in case there's something proprietary within the plan that the entrepreneur doesn't want to share with people unless they have signed a confidentiality agreement. Beyond that, the first real section of the plan is always going to be the executive summary. This part of the plan is probably the most important part. It also seems to confuse a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with when they first see the plan, because you're going to see basically an executive summary contains information that's repeated in the other sections throughout the plan, and that's by design. It is by definition a summary. It's a summary of the plan. And the reason for that section, the executive summary, is that a lot of times readers just read the executive summary, and then they might go, if they see something in the executive summary that they're curious about or they want more information about, then they'll go find that section of the business plan and read more detail. But the executive summary is really a standalone part of the plan where theoretically the reader should be able to just read the executive summary and nothing else and have a very good comprehensive overview of the business. Maybe not all the specific details. For example, all the financial details or all the details about the management's background or whatever it is, but they'll have a good overview of the business and really be able to understand everything that they need to know to at least decide whether they want to read further or meet with the entrepreneur. So it's probably the most important section of the business plan, and so it's very critical that the right component parts go into the executive summary. What I include in the order of things, I like a business plan to flow well. I like it to make sort of logical sense as far as the order of the different sections. And I'm going to tell you how I put a plan together, but it's not set in stone. And depending on the type of business, industry that it's in, stage of development, things like that, it may make sense to reorganize the order of the sections. But I'm going to talk about the sections that I always include. Sometimes I add additional sections, again, depending on the type of business. But in this segment, I'm just going to go through the sections that absolutely must be in the plan. And I'm going to present them in the order that I would write a plan in. But again, it's not set in stone. Depending on your business, you may want to change the order of things a little bit. But this is how I like to do it. So the executive summary comes first. The next section is what I call a company summary or company overview, and that basically just talks about what type of company, what the company does basically, who owns the company, where it's located, some component parts like that, just the description of the company, the legal form of the company, those kind of things to just give the person the nuts and bolts information about the company. Then I do a sort of product and service or product or service description, depending again on what the company does. And in that section, it gives all the detail about the product, service, or both that the company provides. So again, depending on the type of company, you're going to have all the products or all the services or both listed out in detail. Pricing, it's a good idea to put a pricing model in this section if you know what the pricing is going to be, or at least price ranges, how the product or service fits within the market, what's the niche you're trying to fill, and fit that into the context of the industry that you're going to work in and things like that. So product or service summary comes next. The next section I include is the management team section, and that's just going to have biographies for each management member, key management team member. You also can put an advisory board and board of directors in here. If you're a corporation, you're going to have a board, you want to list the board of directors. Within the bios, I don't include full CVs. Sometimes if somebody has a very lengthy CV, I may put that at the back of the business plan in an appendix. But I put a biography in the management team section for that individual. The biography, the real difference is a CV or resume is going to be more like an outline format, whereas a biography is more of a written paragraph type of format where it's more conversational, if you will. It's easier to read rather than just having a listing. With that said, for education and things like that, I may put bullet points to outline some of those things, especially if the team member has a long list of accolades or credentials and things like that, or skills that I want to list. Sometimes bullet points are easier. Whatever format I can put it in that makes it easiest for the reader to go through the information, that's what I like to do. But in general, I include a biography. It's going to be a couple paragraphs for each team member outlining their background. Again, board of directors, advisory team, and then if you have a specific gap in your team, for example, if you don't have a CFO, sometimes I'll list on there that you're actively looking for a CFO to let the reader know that although you don't have that team member in place, you recognize that you need it and you're going to do what you need to do to put it in there. Usually at the end of this section, I usually like to put a management team diagram as well. That just outlines how the various segments of the management of the business are going to overlap, or who's in charge of what, depending on, again, the type of business. The next section I put in the plan is the industry analysis and competitive analysis section. In this area, I look at the context or the operating environment for the business. So what industry or what sector of the economy is it going to operate in? Who are the competitors that are the top performers in that group? What are the key statistics? Who are the demographics served? What's your target market? What's your target area, market area, meaning where are you going to operate? Is it an internet business? So it's obviously on the net, and could be global. Is it a brick and mortar location for a specific city? And depending on what that answer is, then you want to provide background information. For example, if you're going to operate in Los Angeles, then you want some information specifically about Los Angeles and maybe even the neighborhood or area of town that you want to operate in, including demographic information, income levels, makeup of the population of that area, that kind of thing, to let the reader know that you've done your homework basically, and you understand the operating environment within which your business is going to thrive and survive and all those things. Competition, obviously, again, you want to put the key competitors in there. I like to do sometimes a competitive advantages table where I compare various characteristics of your business with all the different competitors. Obviously, that needs to look positive, and relating your company to theirs, you need to have a competitive advantage over the major competitors in the industry. So it's a good idea to outline those comparisons. The next section is going to be basically the operational plan section, where facilities that are needed, an operational plan, where you outline if for example, if you're operating in a brick and mortar location, you want to talk about where the location is going to be, what type of building you're going to need, if you need one, if it's not an internet-based company and you do need a building, or if it is an internet-based company but you need a warehouse, where's that warehouse going to be, how big is it, what's the cost per square foot, what equipment do you need, what technology do you need, what employees are you going to need, what are all the cost components that go into that, what's your build-out cost if you have construction costs, what your ongoing costs for rent, or if you're going to buy a building, how much are you going to pay for it? That kind of thing needs to go in this section. And again, I like to get into the actual cost components, which start to feed into the financial part of the business plan, which we're going to talk about in a second. The next section is the marketing. So I call it basically the sales and marketing section, or sales and marketing strategy section. In this area, you need to talk about marketing in terms of what your overall strategy is, how you're going to advertise. Again, if it's an online business, you're probably going to be doing a lot of online marketing, so you're going to do SEO. You maybe do pay-per-click, PPC, AdWords, that kind of stuff. So you want to discuss exactly what you're going to do there. Again, I like to include budget, what the cost components are going to be. If you're going to hire outside consultants, ad agencies, or people to produce marketing materials for you, or anything like that, or you're going to have a sales team, you're going to have outside sales reps in the field. How many are you going to have? What area of the country they're going to cover? What are the cost components? Are you going to have to pay for a car? Are they going to have sort of a travel budget, a meet and greet budget, a wine and dine kind of budget? All those kind of things need to go into this section. Then I have typically SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. That's a good section to include, which again, this is sort of a competitive advantages thing that we talked about previously, but the first two, S and W, strengths and weaknesses, deal with internal strengths and weaknesses of your actual company. The last two, which are opportunities and threats, deal with outside forces that you have to deal with, both opportunities that are good and then threats that are negative. So when you do the threats, it's a good idea to, in the weaknesses and threats, it's a good idea, even though you list those negative things, to sort of turn that around and explain how you're making those a positive, and I'll get into that in another segment in the future. Then the final segment of the plan, final section of the plan, is the financial analysis section, and this is where your financial forecast is going to go. I like to do 5 years. 3 years is a minimum forecast that you want to do, but I like to do a 5-year forecast. I typically do the first 2 years in months, and then the last 3 years in quarters. And I do provide a full set of financials, so you want an income statement, balance sheet, and a cash flow statement. Typically I'll build, depending on the complexity of the business, I may build additional tables like a revenue model, or a revenue and cost of goods sold model if they're selling a product. Also, I do sometimes an employee table with all the various expected employees, what their salary is going to be, employee cost, benefits, taxes, etc. Or any other tables and graphs and things like that to help highlight various aspects of the financial model that I think are important, that need to be expanded upon to help the reader really understand those components. One thing to keep in mind in general too, when going over everything in the plan, you're always writing from the perspective of the investor. A lot of times very technically oriented people, engineers, software engineers, inventors and things like that, want to dig very deeply into the technical aspects of the business plan, and you can do that a little bit in the product and service section that I mentioned earlier. But in general, the plan is a sales tool for the most part. It is partly to help you build a business, but again, the technical parts of that don't necessarily, you don't need to dig into that kind of detail typically in a business plan. It's always a good idea to have that information available either in your head, if you can discuss it, or in written form somewhere else outside of the business plan. But for the most part, investors, if you're showing it to investors, they don't really need that much detail on the technical aspects of the business. What they want to know is how are they going to make money if they invest in it. That's the key. So again, with regard to everything in the plan, and that includes the financial section, you definitely want to write it from the perspective of the reader, and normally that's either going to be an investor or possibly a banker if you're going for a loan. I always include financial assumptions at the end of the financial analysis section to let people know what assumptions were made. If it's not clear within the financial tables what the assumption might have been. And then again, I can typically place other appendices in the back, maybe CVs, letters of interest if you have customers that have already indicated interest. Things like that can be put at the back of the business plan as supplemental information, or you can just make a statement that those materials are available. And I like to end the plan with kind of a call to action, just a quick paragraph saying, thanks for reading, and here's my contact information if you'd like to speak about it. I also put a kind of a call to action at the end of the executive summary that's similar to that, that lists kind of some information about the opportunity and asks the person for a meeting and provides contact information. We'll talk a little bit more about those specifics in other segments, but in general, that's the basic format that I'll work with in every plan that I write. And again, sometimes you alter those sections a little bit, or the order of them, depending on the type of business. But in general, that's how I write a plan. That's the order of the different sections of the plan that I use. And I found over the years that it works quite well.